What's up, class? Today we are talking about the quadratic formula and some other stuff too. Alright, so first things first, you must memorize the quadratic formula. I will not give it to you. If you ask me, Mr. Wicklehouse, I can't remember what the quadratic formula is, I'll say, too bad. I told you to memorize it. You need to memorize it. There's tons and tons and tons of ways to memorize this thing. There's songs on YouTube. Just look at it over and over again until you get it memorized. That being said, the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? That's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Memorize it. Do whatever you have to do to get this thing memorized. It's very important. Not doing an example yet. Hold on. There we go. Pages stuck together. Okay. So this is where we get the pieces for the quadratic formula. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's where the a, b, and c come from in the quadratic formula. So if I'm coming over here and looking at this quadratic formula, then whatever the leading coefficient is, or the coefficient on the x squared, that goes everywhere where there's an a. Whatever the coefficient is on just the x that's not squared, just this x here in the middle, that's what goes in the b's. And then c is the number without any x on it, and that's what will go into the c. You have to plug those values into the quadratic formula. Okay. Always make sure that the equation you are working with is equal to 0 before you start plugging in numbers. It always has to be equal to 0. It's very important. Also make note in your mind that the quadratic formula always works. So if you're sitting there trying to factor something or whatever, complete the square or whatever, and you just cannot, for whatever reason, remember how to do the factoring or how to complete the square or whatever it is that you're trying to do, if you have the quadratic formula memorized, you will always, always, always have a way to find your answer. Memorize the quadratic formula, and then knowing how to use it will fix any issue that you have with factoring or anything else. You need to memorize the quadratic formula. It always works. That being said, now let's do an example. Okay, I've got 8x squared plus 5x plus 2 equals 11x. Okay. What's the first thing I do? And you better be saying getting this thing equal to 0. Okay. So I'm going to subtract 11x minus 11x minus 11x, and I get 8x squared. 5 minus 11 is negative 6x plus 2, and that now is equal to 0. Okay. Alright, now I look at this and say, okay, these are all nice even numbers. I got an 8, I got a 6, got a 2. I can factor a 2 out of this. So I'm going to factor a 2 out before I do anything else. And it's going to make my calculations a little bit easier. You might say, well, Mr. Wicklehouse, this doesn't look like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. You're right, it doesn't right now. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2 and get 4x squared minus 3x plus 1. 0 divided by 2 is just 0. Now I can do what I need to do. So I get a equals 4. There's the a value in front of the x squared. b equals -3. Make sure you keep the negative with it. Don't just write down 3. And c equals 1. Okay. Quadratic formula, x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Plug the b value in here. -3. I always just put parentheses where the things are that I'm going to be plugging in. Here's another b, so that's -3 squared. Minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 1. All over 2 times 4. Okay. Negative and a negative. That makes +3 plus or minus 9. Square root of 9. -4 times 4 is -16. Times 1 is -16. All over 2 times 4, which is 8. Okay. Now I'm going to simplify this. I got 3 plus or minus 9 minus 16 is the square root of -7 all over 8. Okay. Now this is where things get a little hairy, but when you're doing the quadratic formula, you can find complex solutions, or in other words, imaginary solutions. Okay? Those are possibilities now. We don't just say, oh, there's a negative under here, or there's no real solution. We've done work with imaginary solutions now. It's time to start incorporating those into our solutions. So now I've got 3 plus or minus. There's the negative. I'm going to pull that out as an I. Square root of 7 all over 8. And there we go. There's our solution. Okay? That's how you use the quadratic formula. This should be somewhat familiar for you because you've done it before. Alright, moving on. Let's talk about the discriminant. So inside the quadratic formula is a very important little equation that can tell us some very important things about the quadratic we are working with. It's called the discriminant. And it is part of the quadratic formula that is underneath the square root. So this little bit of information underneath the square root, b squared minus 4ac, is what is called the discriminant. Okay? And what we do with that is we plug the numbers in that we need to plug in, and it'll tell us whether we have 2 real solutions, 2 imaginary solutions, or 1 real solution. So let's look at some situations here in which we would use this. So, situation 1 is when we get 1 real solution. So here's our quadratic. It's equal to 0. We're going to use the discriminant to tell us what kind of solutions we're going to get. So b squared minus 4ac. Okay? So, a is 3. B is 12, C is 12. Okay, so I'm going to do 12 squared minus 4 times 3 times 12. 12 squared is 144 minus 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 12 is 144, and we get 0. Okay, so that being said, my discriminant is equal to 0. And if my discriminant, if b squared minus 4ac, you go through and do that, and it is equal to 0, then you have 1 real solution. Okay? one real solution when the discriminant is equal to 0. Alright, let's look at another situation. We're going to use the discriminant again. B squared minus 4ac. A equals 1, B equals 12, C equals 32. Just getting those numbers from the coefficients here on the x's and the number by itself. So I've got 12 squared minus 4 times 32 times 1. This is a problem. Or is it? Let's see. This is 144. Let's see. 432 times 4. That is 8. That is 12. Okay. 128 times 1 is negative 128. 144 minus 128, let's see, is 12, 4, 16. Okay. Now I did all the calculation. For some reason I was thinking that was going to come out to be bigger than 144, and that would have been not good. But anyway, our solution here for the discriminant, or for the discriminant is 16. So, b squared minus 4ac is 16, which is greater than 0. If the discriminant is greater than 0, then we have two real solutions. Okay? All you're doing is plugging these numbers in, and you're trying to figure out if they're greater than 0, equal to 0, or in the next situation that we have, we're going to see if it's going to be less than 0. So, again, we're doing b squared minus 4ac, and we're saying, is that number greater than 0, equal to 0, or less than 0? Well, a equals 5, b equals negative 3, c equals 6. Okay, so negative 3 squared minus 4 times 5 times 6. Negative 3 squared is 9, minus 4 times 5 is 20, times 6. 20 times 6 is 120. That is negative 111. Okay, so b squared minus 4ac equals negative 111, which is less than 0, so I have two imaginary solutions. And that, guys, is what the discriminant is, and those are the three situations that go along with it that you need to be concerned with. Is the discriminant greater than 0, which gives us two real solutions? Is the discriminant equal to 0, which gives us one real solution? Or is the discriminant less than 0, which gives us two imaginary solutions? That's all we're doing for today. I will talk to you later.